A wife must obey her husband. Do you understand? Don't you dare embarrass me.
My husband Patrick pressured me, just for inviting my sister Nicole over to our house. Does he really care that much about appearances? To me, she's my only precious family member left. After losing my parents, she's the only one I can trust, yet I can't seem to relax. It must be because Patrick is there. However, the situation takes a sudden turn.
Hey Patrick, why is there, behind you?
Nicole asks upon seeing Patrick. Hearing that, Patrick visibly panics. Seeing the situation unfold, I become certain I wasn't wrong. My name is Amanda. I'm a 29-year-old housewife. I met Patrick at the company I worked at a few years ago. Back then, he was in the same department as me and was someone everyone admired. And I too, was one of those people who admired Patrick. So when he confessed his feelings to me, I was surprised. There was Patrick, who received envious looks from our coworkers, and then there was me, just a plain employee. Even so, Patrick had his eyes on me. That made me so happy. I accepted Patrick's confession. We started dating after that, and then got married. I thought if we were considering having children in the future, it would be better to do things sooner rather than later. At Patrick's request, I quit the company I had been working at. I thought it would be too difficult to handle housework while also working. In the future, I'd likely be raising children, and it was clear that it would be hard to secure time for that. Patrick didn't have a low income, so I thought we'd somehow manage. But we were unable to conceive a child as easily as we had hoped. We wanted to have children but weren't seeing results. Perhaps at his wit's end, Patrick told me to go to a fertility clinic. But isn't this the kind of thing couples go to together? I'd feel uneasy going alone, and I want you to come with me, Patrick. These days, it's a given that infertility isn't just caused by women. Above all, I thought getting to the root of the problem was the fastest path to a solution. I'll adjust my schedule, I added, inviting him to go to the fertility clinic with me. But Patrick made a disgusted face at my words. That's no place for a man to go. Can't you just go alone, get the necessary tests done, and be done with it? Don't bother me with this. How can you say something so horrible? It's normal for couples to tackle fertility treatments together. There might be issues with you too, Patrick. When I said that, Patrick, who had been quiet until then, "What did you say?" raised his voice. Startled by his sudden change in demeanor, I sank to the floor. Patrick, with a face full of anger, looked down on me like that. "Are you trying to say I'm defective? Don't get cheeky with me, you're my wife. Listen up. It's your fault we can't have a child. You're the one to blame. We can't conceive because you're a good-for-nothing wife." His words were so cruel, I couldn't even shed tears. Consumed solely by fear, I simply repeated "I'm sorry" over and over until Patrick's anger subsided somewhat. Then I fled to my room as if escaping. Ever since we got married, I became unable to voice my opinions to Patrick. Patrick held outdated views that women should respect men and that wives were their husbands' slaves. He tried to control me. By this point, I no longer had the energy to consider how absurd that was. If I expressed even the slightest disagreement with Patrick, he would yell at me, pressure me, and force me to abandon my own assertions. I never thought about getting a divorce, strangely enough. Looking back, Patrick had become such a terrifying presence to me that I couldn't go against him no matter what. I think I had this fixed idea that I couldn't betray him. If only I had divorced him and escaped from Patrick at that point, I wouldn't have met such a terrible end. Although I underwent infertility tests at the OB/GYN clinic, no abnormalities were found in me. I thought perhaps the issue was with Patrick, But no matter how much I tried to persuade him, he would only say,
"There's no way the problem is with me. If there's nothing wrong with you, you'll get pregnant eventually."
No matter how much I begged, he wouldn't go get tested. In the end, we never found out why we couldn't have children. My in-laws hadn't started pressuring us for grandchildren yet. But sometimes I'd hear stories about relatives having grandkids and could sense they were indirectly putting pressure on me.
"I'm not urging you or anything. But you can't always have children whenever you want. It gets harder if you wait until later to decide you want them after all,"
my mother-in-law Maria would say, making me feel awful. It's not that I don't want children or anything like that. On the contrary, I love children, and I was determined to raise my own child with care if I had one. But I can't do what I'm unable to do. So each time, I could only force an awkward smile and try to get through the moment.
"Amanda is quite the inadequate wife. I'm sure Patrick feels embarrassed because of her,"
my father-in-law Mark would say, and Patrick would nod in agreement.
"You got that right. At home, she's always pressuring me to help with chores or go to the doctor with her. It's embarrassing."
Hearing Patrick's words, Maria and Mark would give pitying looks. It's true I asked him to help with housework, but that was when I was in poor health. Patrick happened to have a day off, so I just asked him to bring in the laundry that was hanging outside. But even then, Patrick got furious, yelling,
"You're a housewife, but you're making me do chores?"
After that, no matter how sick or miserable I felt, I resolved everything on my own somehow. The respectable Patrick had earned the absolute trust of Maria and Mark. So if Patrick said something, it was taken as the complete truth. Inevitably, I became the villain in Maria and Mark's eyes. Going to my in-laws' house made me feel unbearably self-conscious. Despite that, Patrick must have disliked being home alone with me, because he insisted on going to his parents' house every weekend without fail.
"Mom and Dad worry about me. I'm their precious son, so if I don't show my face regularly, of course they'll be concerned."
With no room to refuse, I was more or less forced to accompany him to my in-laws. My own parents had passed away in a car accident a few years prior, leaving my sister Nicole as my only family. Still, Nicole was my one and only family member, so I wanted to see her. But while Patrick frequently wanted to see his own parents, he detested the idea of me meeting Nicole to an unusual degree.
"You're married now. I'm the only one you should be devoted to, along with my parents. Don't forget that."
I could only nod at Patrick's words, hating myself more than anything for it. In the end, I couldn't meet Nicole. We were limited to exchanging messages and phone calls during the day while Patrick was out. Nicole sounded worried about me over the phone, her voice tinged with unease.
"Are you really okay? Should I come visit soon? I still haven't met Patrick after all."
By this point, it was already our 3rd year of marriage, but Nicole and Patrick had never met. Normally, I think the families would meet before the wedding, but Nicole was too busy with work to find the time back then. Nicole did attend our wedding ceremony. But it was such a big wedding with many of our bosses and friends invited that there wasn't much time for personal greetings. We had agreed to do family introductions when our schedules allowed. So while Nicole knew what Patrick looked like, she didn't know what kind of person he was. And the same was true from Patrick's perspective.
"Your sister must be a nobody. She doesn't even have parents anymore. I bet she'll end up living a lonely life, unable to ever get married,"
Patrick would sometimes say mockingly about Nicole. Each time he said such things, all I could do was bite my lip and look down. Of course, it infuriated me to hear my only precious family member spoken ill of. But having come to see Patrick as a terrifying existence, I lacked the courage to argue against his words. However, that situation was about to abruptly change. It started with Nicole's birthday approaching. Glancing at the calendar, I realized it was already coming up next month. Feeling time passing faster than expected, I let out an inadvertent sigh.
What?
Do you have some complaint? Patrick asked, looking displeased upon seeing me. Worried I had angered him, I explained the situation a bit awkwardly. I just realized Nicole's birthday is coming up soon. That's all it was, so don't let it bother you, I said with a forced smile. I was anxious about whether my smile looked natural, but seeing my expression, a nasty grin spread across Patrick's face.
Ah, I see, I see.
Patrick nodded, his smile growing eerie.
Come to think of it, I still haven't met Nicole. Bring her over next time. It's about time I greeted her properly, don't you think?
His words made me
What?
blurt out. Up until now, Patrick had acted like he couldn't care less about Nicole. What was this about? Delight at the prospect of seeing Nicole for the first time in years and doubt towards Patrick's motives clashed in my mind.
It must be hard for a useless wife like you to handle all the housework alone. She's single anyway, so just convince her to help out. It'll be great for me to have 2 slaves instead of 1.
Patrick's next words filled me with despair. In the end, Patrick just wanted to gain another slave. It's true Nicole is single, but she has her own life to live. Hearing Patrick's callous plan made me question whether it was wise to invite Nicole over so simply. But the course had already been set, so I resolved to keep it to just 1 meeting and contacted Nicole.
A wife must obey her husband. Understand? Don't you dare embarrass me.
As the day of Nicole's visit to my home drew closer, Patrick kept repeating the same thing to me every single day. He was probably afraid that upon seeing Nicole, I would disregard his words and seek her help with my personal issues. However, I had no intention of bothering Nicole with such private matters, so Patrick's concerns were entirely unnecessary. Eventually, the day of Nicole's arrival came. As I was doing household chores and waiting, the doorbell rang.
Nicole, it's been a while.
When I opened the door, there stood Nicole. It was the first time I had seen her since the wedding, but I felt relieved to see that she looked as lively as ever. As I invited Nicole inside, Patrick emerged, looking more dressed up than usual. At first, he stood tall, trying to exude an air of authority, but the moment he laid eyes on Nicole, he froze in place.
Is something wrong? No, it's nothing.
The truth is, Nicole is an unbelievably beautiful woman. Her stunning looks had earned her the title of Miss University in beauty pageants multiple times. Back when we were in college together, I often received requests from male acquaintances who wanted me to introduce them to Nicole. It pains me to admit it, but I have a rather ordinary face. With makeup, my appearance is passable, but Nicole's beauty is on a completely different level. Patrick, seeing Nicole for the first time, was staring at her with flushed cheeks. Honestly, it made me feel disgusted. I stepped in between the two of them.
Let me introduce you. This is my sister, Nicole. And this is Patrick. Thank you for coming today.
Nicole smiled and expressed her gratitude, but Patrick's gaze remained fixed on her. However, Nicole was looking at Patrick with a puzzled expression. I thought she might have been put off by Patrick's stare, but her words made me realize that I had misunderstood.
Hey, Patrick. Why are there babies behind you?
Excuse me? At Nicole's question, Patrick looked utterly confused. For a moment, I couldn't comprehend what Nicole was saying either, but then I remembered her unique ability. Nicole has had a slightly unusual constitution since birth. Ever since she was little, she would point at empty spaces and have conversations with a smile, even though no one was there. Of course, our parents found this behavior strange and asked if someone was there. According to Nicole, our grandfather was standing in that spot. At the time, our grandfather had already passed away. It's what people would call having a sixth sense. It was a sensation I couldn't understand, but as we spent time together, I naturally came to believe that Nicole could see ghosts. Nicole never tried to hide the fact that she could see spirits. She would greet and laugh at seemingly empty spaces. Some people found it creepy, but Nicole didn't let it bother her and continued to live by her own style. Her being unmarried at this age might have something to do with her unique perspective. People who approached Nicole solely based on her looks usually got scared off by her behavior and distanced themselves. But Nicole never seemed to mind. "Nicole, what exactly do you see?" Curious about the babies Nicole mentioned, I asked her. She then proceeded to describe in detail what she saw behind Patrick. According to Nicole, it wasn't just one entity clinging to Patrick. Several baby-like figures with blurry outlines were clinging to Patrick's back. Some of them were even hugging Patrick's body.
Amanda mentioned having trouble conceiving, but that's probably Patrick's fault.
At Nicole's words,
"What?"
Patrick exclaimed. Imagining the scene just described, he turned pale, shedding his usual good guy facade, and glared at Nicole and me while sweating profusely.
"What the hell is this? Ghosts don't exist. Are you trying to scare me? That's in poor taste."
Nicole had no intention of startling him or anything like that. She was simply conveying what she saw. Suddenly, Nicole smiled at Patrick. Or so I thought, but her gaze wasn't directed at Patrick, but rather at the babies that were presumably behind him. Nicole muttered,
"Poor things."
a single phrase. According to her, the babies all had agonized expressions on their faces. They were glaring at Patrick as if he were their enemy.
"What on earth did you do? These children seem to hold a grudge against you. If this continues, you might meet a terrible fate. Even now, they have the power to influence you. It wouldn't be surprising if something irreversible happened."
Nicole's voice was serious, making it clear that she wasn't joking. That's how critical Patrick's situation was. How did it come to this? And why were babies clinging to Patrick in the first place? I couldn't even begin to imagine the reason and swallowed hard.
"Patrick, what did you do? How did things end up like this?"
If he had been living a normal life, this shouldn't have happened. Even Nicole said,
"I've never seen anyone in this state before."
Unless he had done something truly terrible, it's unlikely that he would be resented by so many babies. What on earth had Patrick done? At first, Patrick remained silent, but then he seemed to give in and started shouting.
"What the hell? I was just having a little fun, that's all. Why is this happening? Just having fun? What do you mean?"
Hearing Patrick's words, it seemed like he had some idea of what was going on. When I asked him, Patrick reluctantly spoke. Somehow, seeing the numerous babies and Patrick's attitude, I felt like I could guess the answer.
"Don't tell me, you were cheating?"
At my words, Patrick vehemently said,
"No, I wasn't."
But his face was covered in sweat, and his expression was pale. I could tell that Patrick's words were a lie. Observing our exchange, Nicole, who had been silent until then, asked, "Can I say something?" She then shared what she had understood in her own way. "These babies are probably Patrick's children. The ones who were meant to be born but couldn't. Those children are clinging to Patrick, wishing they had been born." Hearing her words, I realized that my earlier suspicions had been correct. Patrick had been cheating with multiple women, and it was likely that this continued even after he married me. Whenever a mistress got pregnant, he would have the child aborted, repeating this cycle over and over. As a result, the poor children who couldn't be born were clinging to their father, Patrick, with feelings of resentment.
I can't believe it.
Although I couldn't get pregnant, I still believed that children should be cherished. And yet, what Patrick and his mistresses had been doing was tantamount to disregarding those children. Putting aside the fact that I couldn't conceive even though I wanted to, I felt a surge of anger at what they had done. Of course, the fact that he had been cheating was unforgivable in itself. After all, it was a betrayal against me. However, I was now glad that I hadn't gotten pregnant. If I had, my child might have become one of the babies clinging to Patrick. The thought made my chest ache unbearably. Patrick was flustered under our contemptuous gazes. Then he started saying,
"Don't say such stupid things. First of all, ghosts don't exist. You two must have conspired together. I don't know anything. I'm completely clueless."
It seemed that Patrick had no intention of admitting his guilt. Of course, I could understand how difficult it was to believe in Nicole's ability. From my perspective, having spent many years with Nicole, I knew her power was real. But for Patrick, who was meeting her for the first time today, it was probably hard to believe. However, if that were the case, he wouldn't be this flustered. He should have been able to brush it off as a ridiculous lie. Patrick's very attitude was proof of what Nicole was saying. If he had nothing to hide, he could have remained composed. The fact that he couldn't do so meant that Patrick had something to conceal.
Either way, since there are suspicions of your infidelity, I'm going to do what I need to do. Let's keep our distance for a while. I don't want to live with someone who is resented by numerous babies.
Up until now, I had never felt the urge to defy Patrick. Because in my mind, Patrick was a terrifying existence, someone I shouldn't go against. However, I was different now. Certainly, Patrick was a frightening person. Maybe even more so than I had thought. But hearing Nicole's words, I couldn't help but feel that it was unforgivable. I couldn't continue this married life with someone like him any longer. If that was the case, I thought it would be better to cut ties with him right then and there. At my words, Patrick looked at me with a shocked expression.
Why? I thought you loved me. So why are you coming to this conclusion?
Surprisingly, Patrick seemed to have mistakenly believed that the reason I wouldn't seek a divorce was that I loved him. What kind of thought process was that? Day after day, I was pressured, given cold stares, and forced to associate with Maria and Mark against my will. And yet, my mind wasn't so messed up that I could still love him despite all that. The love I had felt for Patrick at the beginning of our marriage had only faded over the years. Now, while I still felt intimidated by his frightening presence, I no longer harbored any feelings of affection for him.
Don't say such foolish things. There's no way I could possibly love you. Not after being told so many horrible things. Let's get a divorce. I've reached my limit. I have no need to be married to someone like you.
I clearly expressed my intentions. I didn't want to waste any more time on Patrick. It was best to quickly sever ties and distance myself from him. Ignoring Patrick's attempts to stop me, I returned to my room. Then, taking only the bare essentials, I immediately went back to the living room. Nicole, who had been quietly watching the exchange between Patrick and me, seemed to have realized what I wanted to do. But she didn't stop me.
I'm going to head out now. I'll mail you the divorce papers later, so don't forget to submit them. Hey, wait a minute.
Ignoring Patrick's attempts to stop me, I left the house with Nicole. Despite the suddenness of my decision, Nicole smiled at me. For now, let's go to my place. Although Nicole's house was some distance away from the house I had been living in with Patrick, as a housewife. I didn't need to consider the distance to a workplace. So we settled on the arrangement that I would stay at Nicole's place for a while as I looked for a job and a new home. "You can stay here forever, you know," Nicole told me, but I knew it wasn't good to rely on her indefinitely. That being said, I had accumulated a lot of loneliness from the years I couldn't see Nicole. So even when I moved to a new place, I was considering finding a home near hers. As I was searching for a job, Nicole recommended the company she worked for. Apparently, they were short on office staff and were in a bind. I happened to have the qualifications that were useful for office work, so I decided to go in for an interview. I was evaluated as highly competent and was offered a position. One day, as I was relaxing at home after coming back from work, the doorbell rang. It was too early for Nicole to be coming home. For a moment, I found it odd, but I thought it must be a delivery and opened the door. Standing there was Patrick.
"How did you know this place?"
Patrick shouldn't have known where Nicole's house was. So how did he find out? I broke out in a cold sweat at the unexpected reunion with someone I thought I'd never see again. Ignoring my reaction, Patrick, who looked slightly thinner, spoke.
"I saw you around here the other day. From there, I kept following you, and that's how I found out where this place was. Listen, Amanda, let's get back together. Divorce isn't good. Ever since then, something's been off. I keep hearing these auditory hallucinations. I won't forgive you. I won't forgive you."
It seemed that Patrick had lost his mind. Or maybe the children clinging to Patrick were lashing out at him with their resentment. Without Nicole here, I couldn't know for sure, but I had spent a long time with her. It was only natural that I had become somewhat knowledgeable about these things. Disregarding my presence, Patrick continued speaking.
"Even inside the house, things started getting weird. The other day, I found nails in the bathroom. They weren't mine, they were much smaller. The size of a baby's nails."
Patrick's demeanor as he spoke was one of desperation. If left like this, surely, just as Nicole had said, things would become irreversible. Maybe it was already too late. However, I didn't feel the slightest urge to lend a helping hand to the pitiful man in front of me.
"Please, come back home. Or call Nicole right now. I was wrong, I won't betray you again. So please, help me."
He must have been really cornered. If it were the Patrick from a short while ago, his pride would have gotten in the way, and he wouldn't have apologized. Realizing just how desperate he was, the corners of my mouth involuntarily turned up. Over and over, Patrick pleaded, begging me. For my part, this was Nicole's house, and it would be troublesome if the neighbors saw us. With that in mind, I decided to engage in a brief conversation with him. But not to lend him a helping hand.
"Isn't that your own responsibility? Isn't it your fault for doing things that made you hated? If you had acted properly as an adult, this wouldn't have happened. It's all because of you and your mistresses. Don't say such cold things."
Patrick no longer tried to deny his infidelity. He must have been that cornered. But even if he clung to me, I couldn't muster the spirit to help him anymore.
"I'm sorry, but give up. We're not going to help you,"
I firmly told Patrick. But Patrick shook his head at my words, refusing to accept them. And he clung to my feet.
"Don't say such cold things. I'm really in trouble here. At this rate, I might really meet a terrible fate. I'll take any method. Please, help me. I can't do anything without you, Amanda."
The absurdity of his claim made me feel dizzy. I felt the label of Patrick being a terrifying existence that I had held until now peel away all at once. The man in front of me was just pitiful. Even so, the sins he had committed were real, so I had no obligation to help him.
It's your own responsibility. This is happening because you didn't act properly. Why didn't you understand that you needed to take responsible actions as an adult? I went through hell being married to you. I should have divorced you much earlier."
At my words, Patrick was dumbfounded. The look on his face was so comical that I couldn't help but laugh. And with a smile, I said,
"Please leave. If you don't leave right now, I'm calling the police." "The police?"
It seemed he didn't want the police to be notified, because at my words, Patrick leaped up in a panic and fled. Later, when Nicole came home, I explained the situation to her. Never expecting such a turn of events, Nicole said with a troubled expression,
"The living are far scarier than the dead."
As expected, Patrick was reluctant to divorce. Feeling that we were at an impasse, I decided to hire a lawyer. When I told Patrick that if he didn't agree to the divorce, we would go to court. He must have really disliked that prospect because he reluctantly accepted the divorce. It's a ridiculous story, but even in that situation, Patrick didn't stop seeing his mistresses. Perhaps, in his desperate circumstances, that was the only thing he could enjoy. I had hired a private investigator to keep tabs on Patrick's movements, just in case. But I thought it would be difficult to gather evidence after his infidelity had been exposed. So when I received a large number of photographs during the investigation report, I was surprised. In the end, using that evidence, I demanded a settlement for the infidelity from Patrick and several of his mistresses. Most of the mistresses apparently took that opportunity to distance themselves from Patrick. Now completely alone, Patrick is said to be living in fear, cowering at the thought of when things might become irreversible for him. Eventually, he couldn't even do his job properly and was essentially fired. It seems that Mark and Maria didn't have the energy to care for Patrick, who had gone off the deep end. Even though they had called him their precious son before, they didn't feel inclined to take care of him. With no family to turn to, in order to repay the debt he had taken on to pay the settlement, he is somehow managing to live while working part-time jobs. As for me, I was working hard at the company where Nicole was employed. Just the other day, I was recognized for my outstanding performance and received a promotion. I had found a nice place, but because of what had happened with Patrick, I initially planned to move in alone. However, I decided to live together with Nicole. In the midst of not knowing what might happen, I thought it would be better for us to be together rather than me being alone. Our 3-year marriage was, quite frankly, like hell. But I feel like this experience has deepened my bond with Nicole.
"Happy birthday, Amanda."
Even though I had already turned 30, Nicole still celebrated my birthday with those words. I was so overjoyed that I couldn't help but smile. I vowed to cherish Nicole, my only family, from here on out. That's right, I renewed my determination. It was one of those days when the overcast sky seemed to reflect my unsettled heart. I received a call from the police on my mobile phone.
"Yes, this is Mia." "What?"
The news was grim. My husband Richard had been in a traffic accident and was rushed to the hospital, unconscious. I was at my part-time job, so I asked for permission to leave early and headed straight to the hospital. The drive there was nerve-wracking. Being rushed to the hospital was no small matter. My hands trembled uncontrollably, and I could feel my heart pounding louder and louder. Upon arrival, a relatively young-looking doctor briefed me. He said Richard's life wasn't in danger, but he had suffered a severe head injury and there might be lasting effects. A few minutes later, my daughter-in-law Lily and grandson Paul arrived. Lily was carrying a traveling bag in one hand and holding Paul's hand with the other. However, once in the hospital room, Paul unusually started to fuss.
"Mom, I'm thirsty."
"What? But I don't have any drinks with me."
Then buy me something.
As Lily went to buy a drink, Paul slowly pulled an envelope out of his pocket.
Grandpa gave me a letter to read. He said to read it in secret.
For me?
I opened it curiously to find a folded piece of stationery. Reading the words written in Richard's handwriting, I couldn't understand its meaning. However, it was clear he was trying to communicate something. Clutching onto a sliver of hope, I instinctively reached for Richard's wallet. I had to check its contents before Lily returned, my hands almost slipping in haste. Carefully yet swiftly, I opened his long wallet. My name is Mia. I'm a part-time working housewife, working about 5 days a week. Having been at the same job for about 7 years, I guess you could say I'm somewhat of a veteran there. The decision to start working part-time came after discussions about my husband's retirement. Richard, a teacher, had the option to retire at 65 or continue working as a part-time lecturer.
If I become part-time, our income will decrease. We need to think about our retirement.
Right. We should try to save a bit more. After that conversation, I started working at a nearby supermarket. By then, our son Christopher had already found a job, leaving just the two of us at home. After graduating, Christopher immediately began working for a company and started living alone in an apartment near the downtown area. I worried about whether he was doing all right, but he was already a responsible adult. I realized there was no need for undue concern. One day, I got a call from Christopher.
Hello, Mom? I've got someone I want you to meet.
Both Richard and I were surprised by this news. The woman Christopher brought home was very cheerful and left a good impression.
Nice to meet you. I'm Lily.
Her smile was so bright, she could be mistaken for a celebrity, and she blushed as she made eye contact with Christopher. She was introduced to him by a coworker at his company, and they hit it off the day they met.
I just knew she was the one the moment I met her. Come on, how many times are you going to say that?
Watching the happy couple made us feel joyous too. We thought they could overcome anything that came their way. Richard and I celebrated their union. When it came time to decide where they would live after their wedding, Christopher said something unexpected. Actually, I was hoping we could live at home.
Don't you want to rent a place of your own?
Yeah, but Lily thought it would be nice to have support nearby, especially if she got pregnant. Lily had lost her own parents in an accident and had no one else to rely on. Indeed, pregnancy and childbirth can be daunting. Even someone as upbeat as Lily might have her own concerns.
Understood. We'll make the spare room available for you. Thanks, Mom.
With that, it became official that I'd take on the role of mother-in-law in a more meaningful way. I was worried about whether we'd get along, but Richard didn't seem concerned at all. Well, once the baby arrives, Christopher will probably find a new place and move out, he said nonchalantly, sipping his coffee and returning to his novel.
I hope so.
I shrugged in response. A few months into their stay, we learned Lily was pregnant, and we all rejoiced. Despite her morning sickness and emotional ups and downs, I was there for her throughout the pregnancy. The following year, Lily gave birth to a healthy boy. As a grandmother, I was overjoyed and moved by his arrival. They named him Paul.
That's a good name.
Richard smiled every day, watching his grandson, almost too busy to read his novels. For a while, I couldn't settle down either. Lily, still new to parenting, frequently asked for help. She needed help with diapers, feeding, and night cries, especially when Paul got sick. Lily, you're a mom now. You've got to manage on your own without relying on me.
But I'm just unsure if I'm doing it right.
You're doing great. Don't worry. Despite my encouragement, Lily had a hard time believing in herself. In the end, supporting Lily's parenting took longer than expected. As a result, I had to take more time off from my part-time job, eventually reducing my shifts to 3 days a week. A year after Paul was born, Lily seemed confident enough to manage on her own.
Mia, I can do it. I can manage by myself now.
She said this with a smile, which became more frequent. Her smile deeply reassured me. Seasons changed a few times, and 4 years had passed. Before we knew it, both Richard and I had turned 60, and we even took photos to celebrate the occasion, which feels like just yesterday. Richard retired and started working as a part-time lecturer at the same school. Christopher seemed busy, always muttering something as he faced his laptop day after day. Peeking over, I saw complex pie charts and spreadsheets filled with numbers.
Don't overdo it, okay?
Why not take a break and play with Paul?
Yeah, I will once I finish this,
he replied, somewhat distractedly, before returning his gaze to the screen. I sighed inwardly at this. Meanwhile, I found the right time to go back to working part-time 5 days a week. Going back to work as before, I felt like I could relax a bit more. Christopher and Lily didn't express any desires to move out. Lily didn't resume working and dedicated herself to household chores and childcare. Since Christopher was earning, they didn't seem to worry about living expenses. However, I was surprised when she asked to contribute a little to the living expenses.
Please, Mia. I'll continue to take care of the household and childcare as before.
Isn't Christopher's income enough?
We want to save for the kids' education and extracurricular activities in the future.
But before I could say more, Richard chimed in.
Why not? Education costs a lot these days for kids.
His perspective, coming from someone in education, held some weight.
It's a wise decision on her part.
See, Richard agrees with me.
It seemed she took Richard's approval as a green light. Reluctantly, I agreed to arrange for some living expenses. Paul started preschool, and it's been 2 weeks since his enrollment. The daily struggle of getting him to wear his shoes and stop crying had become routine, but Lily seemed to be having a hard time with him.
Come on, Paul. The bus is going to leave. No, no, no. I want to play with Grandpa. Grandpa has work today. He's not at home. No. Paul, your teachers and toys at preschool are waiting for you.
Lily and I used all kinds of tricks to cheer him up. That's how they would leave every day. But something bothered me. Sometimes Lily didn't come back home after dropping off Paul. The walk to the bus stop was only about 5 minutes, not far at all. Worried she might have gotten into trouble, I tried calling her, but there were times when my calls went unanswered. On such days, she would return home with Paul as if nothing happened, right on time.
Hey, where did you go during the day, Lily?
When I asked, she hesitated slightly before responding.
Oh, just running errands, shopping for household items, clothes, you know. Seems like you were gone for quite some time though. Just taking a little break.
Mom, let her have her breaks.
Christopher intervened, perhaps feeling sorry for her. Indeed, a little break is necessary for someone balancing household and childcare duties.
Right. I'm sorry for sounding accusing.
No one thought to distrust her for taking time off during the day. In fact, it was recognized as something she needed. However, my concerns about her weren't limited to just that. One evening, as I was relaxing in the living room, Lily came over to me.
Mia, I have a favor to ask.
What is it? You seem very formal.
I was wondering if we could increase the living expenses a bit more.
I couldn't believe my ears.
Is the current amount not enough?
Well, you know, With Paul going to preschool and me making friends with other moms, I get invited to lunch.
Lily answered, visibly flustered.
Can't you manage those outings with the money you already have?
With prices going up and they disappear just buying Paul's diapers.
Indeed, I had noticed the rising costs lately. I reluctantly agreed to increase the living expenses slightly. But that wasn't the end of the money requests. She kept finding reasons to ask for more.
What are you spending all that money on?
Well, I've been shopping online.
She admitted to using Christopher's laptop for online shopping, buying things impulsively to relieve stress. I suggested finding other ways to deal with stress, which she agreed to at the time. But within a few days, she was asking for money again. This cycle repeated, and I grew tired of it.
Lily, you need to think more carefully about how you're using money.
That's not it.
Then maybe you should consider taking up a part-time job. We can't keep this up.
After I said this, Lily left the room with a sad, resigned look. After that day, the persistent requests for more living expenses stopped. Instead, I noticed something strange about Richard. He stopped reading his books and spent time in his room on the computer, doing something he wouldn't talk about.
It's just school stuff. I'd rather not have it seen.
So, how about we go out somewhere this weekend?
I've got plans this weekend, sorry.
He would then retreat to his room. This behavior was new. He never used to bring work home before. Lately, he also seemed distant from Lily, avoiding her in the house. But then again, I've also caught them whispering in the hallway.
Something's definitely off.
Feeling uneasy, I discreetly hired a detective to investigate Richard. I hoped there was nothing wrong under our roof. After a few anxious days, fortunately, the investigation revealed nothing suspicious. There was nothing suspicious about them. Whatever I was feeling, it seemed unfounded. Was it all in my head? With these thoughts, I continued my routine, going to the part-time job and back home. It was on a cloudy day, mirroring my unsettled heart, that I received a call from the police.
Yes, this is Mia. Yes, Richard is my husband. What?
The officer spoke in a calm yet slightly excited tone. He informed me that Richard had been in a traffic accident, unconscious, and rushed to the hospital. I was so shocked that I could hardly comprehend the rest of the conversation. The background noise suggested it was a serious accident.
Okay, I understand. Yes, I'll be right there. Goodbye.
I rushed to explain the situation to my manager and got permission to leave for the hospital. The drive to the hospital was agonizing. An emergency transport is never a minor matter. I felt a cold sweat on my back, my limbs wouldn't stop shaking. And my heart pounded louder and louder. Upon arrival, a relatively young-looking doctor briefed me. He mentioned a contusion on his left shoulder, but no life-threatening injuries. However, Richard had sustained a severe head injury, and there might be lasting effects. I was told he would need to stay in the hospital for a while, and I handled the admission procedures.
I wonder if it would be faster to have Lily bring things like a change of clothes and a toothbrush.
With that thought, I hurriedly called Lily, asking her to bring the necessary items. After a few rings, Lily answered the phone.
Hello, Lily? Richard has actually...
What? I can't hear you very well.
Lily seemed to be outside. I could hear the noise of people and passing cars in the background. And for some reason, she sounded rushed in her conversation.
Richard's been in a traffic accident and has been hospitalized.
I raised my voice to a level that wouldn't disturb those around me.
What? Hospitalized? That's terrible.
So, I need you to bring a hospital set.
Got it.
I hung up, puzzled by Lily's emotionless response. A few minutes later, Lily and Paul arrived. Lily was carrying a traveling bag in one hand and holding Paul's hand with the other, both in sandals. I had finished all the paperwork, so I went to meet them. "Grandpa's sleeping. Tell him to get well soon."
Get well!
Paul twirled his finger and said so in his lisping voice. I watched, hoping Richard could hear him. Then, unexpectedly, Paul said, "Mom, I'm thirsty."
What? But I didn't bring any drinks with me. Then buy me something. Wait till we get home.
But, unusually, Paul started fussing about being thirsty. All right. Stay here with Grandma." "I'm sorry, I'll go to the vending machine." Lily left as if admitting defeat.
Grandma, look!
Paul turned his pants pockets inside out and took something out. "Grandpa gave me a letter for you to read. He said to read it in secret."
For me?
It was an envelope, unsealed. Curious, I took out the folded stationery inside. Written in Richard's handwriting was, "Lily dangerous, evidence in wallet." I tried to calm my racing heart, unsure of its meaning. But it was clear he was trying to communicate something. Could it mean there was evidence in his wallet?
Wallet?
We usually don't look through or show each other our wallets. Yet, there might be a clue here. Holding on to a sliver of hope, I instinctively reached for Richard's wallet. As I thought about checking its contents before Lily returned, my hands almost slipped in haste. Carefully, yet quickly, I opened his long wallet. Inside, there were some cash, receipts, a debit card. And, hidden among them, an SD card.
Could this be what he meant?
I picked up the SD card between my thumb and forefinger, lifting it to eye level. Just then, I heard Lily's footsteps returning. I quickly stashed the SD card in my jacket pocket and put Richard's wallet back. "Is this okay?"
I don't want it anymore.
"What?" "But..." "Never mind that, let's go home. Christopher will be back soon." While soothing a disappointed Lily, we left the hospital room. That night, when the whole family was asleep, I turned on Richard's computer. I inserted the SD card to see what was on it. What could it be? Photos, videos, and some Word documents appeared on the screen. Photos? Videos? Richard wasn't the type to carry a camera or shoot videos. So, having photos and videos stored like this was unusual. Without hesitation, I clicked on them. To my shock, they were evidence of Lily's affair. I gasped and covered my mouth. Then, I opened the Word documents. I thought they might be Richard's diary, but they were different. They were Richard's own investigation into the affair, written like a diary. What on earth? I read through the documents, forgetting about the time. But I knew this needed to be resolved quickly. Later, I called Christopher and told him we needed to talk about Lily.
What's up, Mom? What about Lily?
He sat at the living room table, looking puzzled. I showed him the evidence Richard had given me and explained everything. Christopher was shocked and immediately called Lily. She came, looking sleepy after putting Paul to bed.
Lily, don't you have something to say to Christopher and me?
What? I laid out the photos and printed copies of Richard's diary on the table. This is the evidence.
You've been having an affair, haven't you?
The photos showed Lily intimately walking and chatting with a man who wasn't Christopher. What is this?
Pretending won't help. These photos were taken by a detective Richard hired.
I spread them out one by one on the table.
And these are photos taken by Richard.
They were from a day when he unusually said he had errands and didn't go out with me. That day, Richard had been following Lily.
I know who the other man is too. Richard figured it out.
No way.
The delivery guy who comes here often. You were doing all that online shopping just to see him. What a surprise. It's not what it looks like, Christopher, listen. It's not like that.
Lily's voice trembled. Under the living room light, her face turned pale, desperately denying the affair. I've been perfect with the housework and childcare. I wouldn't do something like that. But I didn't believe her words. With all the evidence laid out, she was still trying to hide the truth.
Lily, where were you when Richard had the accident? I was out shopping. Is that all? What are you implying? I'm starting to think you might have caused Richard's accident.
She paused for a moment, but then spoke up.
On what basis would you say that? I've read Richard's diary. You were confronted by Richard about the affair, weren't you? What? And at that time, you admitted to it. Not only that, but you also promised to stop if it was kept a secret from the family.
Lily's eyes shifted. I continued to press on.
But your relationship with that man wasn't over. That's why Richard saw you meeting him at the cafe on the day he followed you.
No, that was...
Richard overheard you saying you resented him. You were planning revenge, weren't you? Well. So, Richard felt his life was in danger, leaving behind photos, videos, and a diary.
Christopher nodded in understanding.
Dad saved those on an SD card and hid it in his wallet in case something happened to him. In his wallet? The letter Paul gave me revealed it.
That short letter given in the hospital room. Without it, I might not have discovered these proofs.
Richard knew you were wary of him but counted on you overlooking Paul. That kid! So, he entrusted Paul with the letter to give it to me if anything happened.
I methodically continued, exposing Lily's actions. And that day, Richard had an accident because of you. No, it's not true.
When I called you, Lily, you were still outside, sounding more rushed and different than usual.
That doesn't mean...
Was it right after you caused Richard's accident?
She looked down with her shoulders shaking, and then whispered. I didn't think it would go that far.
What?
I just wanted to scare him a little. I pushed him from behind while he was waiting at a traffic light.
That's outrageous!
I thought no cars would come by there, like always. Then, by chance, a car came, and Richard.
How could you do that? Dad could have been.
Christopher lunged at Lily.
It's not my fault. Richard is to blame for getting in the way.
Lily raised her voice in defiance, insisting on her innocence. That argument won't hold.
It's clearly your fault. It's not me. I'm not the bad one. A little affair shouldn't matter.
How can you say that with Paul around? I still want to be seen as a woman.
I can't stand this anymore. I'm calling the police.
Christopher took out his mobile phone to call the authorities.
I'll testify that Lily caused Dad's accident. Stop, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
For the first time, Lily voiced an apology, crying out. But it was too late for Christopher and I to forgive her. Christopher reported the entire situation to the police over the phone. The next day, we went to the police station with Lily. The police were surprised by the rapid development of the case. Lily, Christopher, and I were interrogated. I submitted all the evidence Richard had collected, but more decisive proof emerged. It was a surveillance camera from a grocery store near the accident scene. The footage showed Lily pushing Richard, becoming irrefutable evidence. Lily was arrested, and Christopher served her with divorce papers. Lily protested, but Christopher was firm in his decision.
What about Paul?
We'll take care of Paul.
And we'll also demand compensation from you and your affair partner in the divorce proceedings.
Please, have mercy.
Without looking back at her, Christopher stated this matter and returned home. Christopher was granted custody of Paul. As for the man Lily had an affair with, he stopped making deliveries to our place. I thought maybe his delivery area had changed, but that wasn't the case. According to his successor, the previous delivery man had suddenly quit his job. Perhaps he left because he wanted nothing more to do with Lily. But he did that to himself. A few days after the accident, Richard woke up, and we were informed. On my day off from part-time work, I visited Richard. Despite the visible cuts and bruises, he smiled when he saw me.
My left shoulder still hurts. What about any lasting effects?
They did tests, and it seems there are no lasting effects. But I'll need rehabilitation.
I'm so relieved. It's a miracle.
You're exaggerating.
After being discharged, Richard heard about Lily from me and Christopher and was disheartened.
So it came to that. I'm sorry for keeping it from you guys.
He apologized to us. Since then, Richard became somewhat withdrawn. He praised and doted on Paul, who had kept his promise, but otherwise seemed distracted. He probably felt guilty for driving Lily to desperation. It's unfair, he did nothing wrong. However, his former students reached out to him. They would stop by our house after school to chat with Richard and then leave. It was clear how much they admired him, even without any upcoming exams. This support must have been a great comfort to him. Gradually, Richard regained his energy and returned to teaching. While I continued my part-time job, Christopher and I took Paul to preschool. With a school play coming up, we plan to attend as a whole family. I wish for nothing but health and happiness for our family.
Something feels off.
I try to pinch my cheeks to ward off the sudden wave of sleepiness, but it's utterly ineffective. There wasn't anything particularly exhausting about today, just a meal at my in-laws. And I'm not usually short on sleep. Why then, I wonder drowsily when I hear my husband's laughter.
Good night, LOL. I'll make sure you have sweet dreams.
My name is Lila. A 24-year-old office worker, newly married to Riley, who is 5 years my senior. We met through a friend and, after dating for 2 years, were happily married. We had a grand wedding recently and received blessings from many people. Just as I was dreaming about our happy married life ahead, an unexpected misfortune struck. Emerson, my mother-in-law, suddenly fell ill and passed away in no time. Emerson was cheerful and very kind, delighted when I first went to greet her.
Nice to meet you, I'm Lila. Oh, what a joy to have such a lovely woman as my son's wife. I've always dreamed of having tea time with my son's wife. I'd be delighted. Please, let's have tea time together.
Though I was nervous, Emerson welcomed me with a full smile, making me feel at ease and fond of her. We had planned to have tea time together after the wedding settled down, but that dream was shattered with Emerson's passing. We were busy with Emerson's funeral, sorting out her belongings, and handling the inheritance, finally settling down a year later. Then, I got a call from Trevor, my father-in-law.
Layla, how about a meal at our house next weekend night? I'm thinking of ordering takeout. Yes, of course. Thank you.
So, I was invited to dine with Trevor next weekend night, along with Riley. Trevor ordered Singaporean cuisine, which he loves, and we enjoyed the feast. The three of us gathered around the dining table. It was my first time trying Singaporean cuisine, and everything was delicious. Except the soup tasted oddly. Curious, I asked my husband.
Hey Riley, doesn't this soup taste a bit strange? That's just how this dish is. You're not used to Singaporean cuisine, haha.
Though Riley laughed it off, I couldn't stomach the soup, so I avoided it and ate the other dishes. Then, I felt Trevor's sharp gaze.
Lila, I went through the trouble of ordering this, so make sure you drink the soup.
Startled by Trevor's outburst, I hurriedly gulped down the soup. It still tasted weird. The strange taste spread throughout my mouth, and I tried to cleanse my palate with water and other dishes. Gradually, my vision blurred, and I found myself slumping over the table.
What's happening? I'm incredibly sleepy. This isn't good. I'll really fall asleep. I need to stay awake.
As my consciousness faded, I could hear Riley's laughter.
It seems to have worked. Dad, is that thing ready? Of course, it's all set. It's in the dresser drawer in the bedroom. The new ones are amazing, only 0.01 millimeters thick. We didn't have those when I was young.
Realizing Riley and Trevor were discussing contraceptives, I felt a sense of danger but then lost consciousness completely. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed.
What happened?
I murmured groggily.
Oh, thank goodness. You're awake.
Looking towards the voice, there was our neighbor, Luella. Luella immediately called the doctor, who explained that I had been given a large dose of sleeping pills.
Sleeping pills! So that's why the soup tasted so odd.
Then, I learned from Luella.
Your dad and husband ran off in the car, so I accompanied you in the ambulance. I'm so glad you woke up safely. Really? Thank you so much. I'm sorry for the trouble. But what do you mean Dad and my husband fled in a car?
Actually,
Luella found out that the fire alarm was ringing at my in-laws' house and it wouldn't stop, so she decided to check on them. When she rang the doorbell, Trevor came out.
yes.
What's going on, ringing the fire alarm like this? It's been going off for so long. Haven't you found the source yet? This is serious. I'm coming in. Please, it's okay. Don't come into the house. What are you talking about? We're supposed to help each other out in times of need.
Luella said that, barging into the house, and found me lying listlessly in the living room.
Oh my! You've collapsed from inhaling smoke. This is terrible. I need to call an ambulance right away. No, this is different.
Trevor and my husband tried to deny it hastily, but Luella was convinced I had collapsed from smoke inhalation and called for emergency and fire services on the spot.
Lila is just sleeping. That's right. My wife is just tired and sleeping. There's nothing to worry about.
Despite their desperate explanations, Luella objected.
It's strange that she won't wake up with such a loud noise going on. I'm worried. I wonder if the ambulance will arrive soon.
Luella was frantic. Before we knew it, people had started gathering. Riley and Trevor began to sweat profusely. Soon after, Riley and Trevor hurriedly jumped into a car and fled, leaving me behind. That's why Luella ended up accompanying me in the ambulance.
Such a thing. Thank you so much.
I expressed my gratitude to Luella. Then, when I told the doctor about the conversation I heard between Riley and Trevor before losing consciousness, he grimaced and made a call, and I was informed that Riley and Trevor were also admitted to the same hospital.
Riley and Dad are hospitalized. Why?
Apparently, after fleeing the house in the car, Riley and Trevor were driving frantically to get as far away as possible. As a result, the car Riley was driving crashed into the wall of a mansion, causing an accident. Both were brought to this hospital by ambulance, severely injured with broken bones, but their lives were not in danger. Hearing the reason for their admission, I was overwhelmed with anger, disgust, and various other emotions.
They got what they deserved. I'll never forgive them.
I decided to hire a lawyer and sue over this incident. Then, sleeping pills were detected in the soup bowl I had finished, and Riley and Trevor were arrested for assault. The news even reported on the incident. Later, during the police investigation, they were rearrested for attempted rape. Trevor was stressed from being busy with Emerson's funeral and other matters, becoming frustrated. He was planning to visit a nightclub, but when Riley found out, he made a proposition to Trevor.
Dad, if you're that frustrated, I can lend you Lila. But in return, give me Mom's kimonos. Eh? Really? I'd be thrilled to be with young Lila, but... Why Mom's kimonos? Are you running out of money? Yeah, I kinda blew through my savings.
Riley had squandered his savings on gambling and offered me in exchange for Emerson's kimonos, which came from a distinguished family and were valuable. Riley knew this and proposed the trade to Trevor.
Lila doesn't know I'm hooked on gambling. I've used quite a bit from our joint savings account, so I want to cover it up before she finds out. I see. But I can't imagine Lila agreeing to be with me. That's okay. I have a good idea. You still have some of Mom's sleeping pills, right?
Emerson had been prescribed sleeping pills for her insomnia before she passed away. With those sleeping pills remaining, Riley and Trevor concocted their plan. They decided to dissolve powdered sleeping pills in the soup and proceed after I had fallen asleep.
Perfect plan, right? This way I get money, and Dad's frustration is relieved. It's all good. Right. Let's invite Lila over for a dinner party next weekend.
However, their scheme was abruptly foiled by the ringing of the fire alarm, leading to the foolish outcome of causing an accident in their haste to flee in the car. It turns out Riley and Trevor are hospitalized in the same room.
Damn it! How did it come to this? It was supposed to be a perfect plan. If only the fire alarm hadn't gone off. In the end, we couldn't do anything with Lila and ended up getting seriously injured. What a mess. Damn it!
As they openly wept and voiced their grievances, a nurse visiting their room informed them with displeasure. I had demanded compensation through a lawyer in the divorce proceedings, but both of them flatly refused to pay any settlement for the divorce.
To demand compensation from me, her husband, in a divorce trial. Nothing actually happened, so it should be fine. That's right! In the end, all we did was give Lila sleeping pills and nothing else.
Both their reasoning left me and my lawyer utterly dumbfounded. Even when told that administering sleeping pills without consent is unacceptable, they wouldn't listen at all. Moreover,
Hey! Lila! Tell the police not to sue me and Dad. If the victim asks for a non-prosecution, the police won't sue, right?
they had the audacity to command. How low could they possibly be? I continued to ignore them, but they persistently demanded not to sue and to ask for a lighter sentence. However, their demands suddenly stopped at one point. After giving orders every day, it was strange for them to suddenly cease. Curious, I decided to investigate. It turns out they had encountered a serious problem. The owner of the mansion whose wall was destroyed when Riley and Trevor crashed into it was furious and had demanded they pay for the repairs. The damage was extensive, so the cost of repairs was significant. Moreover, my husband had lied, saying,
"We were rushing to the hospital because Dad was suffering from an illness, and that led to the driving mistake."
However, the incident was reported in the news. Upon learning the truth, the mansion owner became even more enraged and insisted on receiving both the repair costs and compensation from the divorce trial. As a result, Riley and Trevor seemed to have bigger problems than just dealing with me.
"It wasn't on purpose. Please forgive us. We beg you."
Riley and Trevor were pleading, but the mansion owner was unforgiving. They were told they must pay no matter what. Since the mansion owner hired a lawyer, Riley and Trevor also had to hire one to handle the situation. Since I had a lawyer as well, The compensation for the divorce was smoothly negotiated between the lawyers. Given their clear wrongdoing, our demands were almost fully met. I also demanded and received the money Riley had misappropriated from our joint savings account. Although I hadn't noticed his gambling addiction, I remembered how his overtime had suddenly increased at one point. Probably, he was lying about working late and going to pachinko instead. And so, I naturally proceeded with the divorce from Riley. The negotiations were handled by our lawyers, and though initially reluctant, Riley agreed to the divorce when I firmly insisted. Riley's lawyer played a significant role by convincing them that they were in a very unfavorable position and needed to show sincerity. Later, I went to thank our neighbor Luella again.
Thank you so much. I don't know how to express my gratitude.
Oh, I didn't do anything special. It's good that you're safe. Perhaps Emerson was looking out for you.
Emerson, you say? What do you mean?
After I was taken to the hospital in an ambulance, the firefighters came and checked the cause of the fire alarm. However, the only source of fire in the house was a candle on Emerson's altar, which no one should have lit. This wasn't enough to trigger the fire alarm, indicating a possible malfunction as there were no other signs of fire.
Maybe Emerson is always watching over you? She was so happy to have such a lovely daughter-in-law.
Luella told me with a smile. It might have been a coincidence, but even so, I felt a warmth thinking about Emerson's kind smile. After expressing my thanks to Luella again, I headed to a certain cake shop. This shop sells a chocolate cake that I've always loved. When I had promised to have tea time with Emerson, I wanted her to try the chocolate from this cake shop. After buying sweet buns, I went to the florist to buy flowers that matched Emerson's cheerful image, with a fresh impression, and headed to visit her grave. Offering the flowers and chocolate at the grave, I expressed my gratitude to Emerson.
Dear Emerson, thank you so much. Your help saved me. Though I've divorced Riley, I will always love you, Mom.
I wished I could have talked more with Emerson. I wanted to have that tea party.
This chocolate was meant to be shared with you, Emerson, during our tea time. It's really delicious.
Just then, the wind blew softly. Feeling as if Emerson had responded, a tear fell from my eye. But thinking that crying would worry Emerson, I lifted my face, smiled, and said,
I'll visit again, Emerson.
And moved on. I decided to take the chocolate back with me later, as I couldn't leave it at the grave. On the way home, I felt incredibly refreshed. Despite everything, I vowed to live energetically from tomorrow on. Returning to single life, I threw myself into work more than ever before. Riley and Trevor, with their complex fractures, seemed to still be in the hospital. The owner of the mansion is trying to collect the repair costs before they are discharged and sent to prison, and it seems they had to sell their car and belongings to pay back the money using their savings. Physically and mentally devastated, and with prison time awaiting them. They are experiencing a living hell. I hope they reflect deeply and pay for their crimes once they are discharged and sent to prison. Since then, I've been visiting Emerson's grave regularly, updating her on my life. Having had enough of love for a while, I've decided to enjoy being single and am studying hard to earn new qualifications. I plan to live every day without regrets. My husband called me disgusting for my severe morning sickness, looking down on me with cold eyes.
You're the one who threw up and made a mess, right? Hurry up and open the window to air it out. If the smell sticks, you're paying for it. Just because you find it hard to go shopping or cook doesn't mean morning sickness isn't an illness. Don't be so stupid.
On top of that, as my morning sickness got worse, my husband left me at home and went on an overseas trip with mother-in-law, Audrina. That was the last straw for me, and I began to plot my revenge. A week later, my husband called, furious. I laughed it off.
Since you told me to clean the house, I did just as you said. Got a problem with that?
I'm Kimberly, a 28-year-old office worker. My husband, Eamon, and I live in a detached house and both work while we've recently become pregnant. While I was happy, my morning sickness was so severe that I couldn't go to work on some days. Fortunately, many at my workplace were understanding.
Once you get through this, it'll get easier, so make sure to rest and take care of yourself.
They gave me some time off when I was considering quitting. So, I spent my days at home, resting as much as possible, eating when I could, and doing household chores. The problem was my husband. He practically stopped doing any housework at all.
You're always at home, right? Even a pregnant woman can clean, so at least do that.
While my husband used to do household chores when we were both working, he stopped doing anything since I took my leave. Even when I said I couldn't do it because of severe nausea, he wouldn't listen. Moreover, he compared me to other pregnant women he had seen, saying,
"Just being lazy and slacking off in the name of morning sickness."
Furthermore, he was extremely averse to me vomiting. The first time I vomited at home, I didn't make it to the toilet and ended up using the living room trash can. Seeing this, my husband, pinching his nose, hurried me to ventilate the room and kept yelling at me, even though my nausea hadn't subsided. Although I vomited into a plastic bag in the trash can, so the can itself wasn't dirty, he made me dispose of the bag and then threw the trash can away.
Hey, what's with that attitude? Why are you telling me to open a window when I'm vomiting? You could open it yourself. And I properly sealed the double bag before throwing it away, so why throw out the trash can in front of me as if to make a point?
Disgusting, smelly, don't talk.
Even if it's in a plastic bag, droplets might have gotten on the trash can.
After that, no matter what I said, don't talk because it's smelly, he wouldn't even listen. I started to consider divorce. Maybe once my morning sickness settled down and I could go back to work, my husband would return to being the kind and helpful person he used to be. But could a husband who hurled such abuse at me while I was suffering return to how he was? Or was this his true nature? As I worried, my morning sickness only got worse. With nausea hitting me multiple times a day, I started carrying a plastic bag with me everywhere in the house to vomit without my husband seeing and dispose of it. However, one time, I didn't manage to dispose of it in time, and he saw me with the bag.
Don't touch anything, all right? You're paying for the sofa you just sat on since you're going to dispose of it because you dirted it.
He looked at me with utter disgust. When I impulsively brought up divorce, I noticed he was holding a pamphlet in his hand. He spread it out to show me.
In about 2 weeks, I'm going on a trip overseas with Mom. We plan to stay for about a week. Don't slack off on cleaning just because I'm not here. Keep the house clean. What? What are you thinking?
While looking at me coldly, my husband laughed in a low voice.
I don't want to stay in a house you've made filthy. The morning sickness should settle down in about 3 weeks, right? By the time I'm back from the trip, it should be nearly over, so clean the house in the meantime.
Fine.
I'll give the house a thorough cleaning.
The next 2 weeks were tough for me. He doubled down on doing nothing, even eating strongly scented meals or spraying harsh perfume around the room despite my pleas because it made me nauseous. Despite locking me in the bathroom, he'd bang on the door furiously and yell if he wanted to use it himself. This lifestyle continued. I immediately informed my parents that I had decided on divorce. Since my husband's attitude changed, I had been discussing it with my parents, who must have realized from my words that convincing me otherwise was no longer possible. They told me to come back home immediately. However, just divorcing and returning to my parents' home wasn't enough for me. I was determined to teach my husband, who lacked any awareness of being a father and thought nothing of the individual differences in pregnancy and morning sickness, a lesson. 2 weeks later, I saw my husband off with a large carry-on bag. These 2 weeks were the peak of my morning sickness, and I had lost more than 2 kilos. If it continued like this, I would end up hospitalized due to severe pregnancy sickness. Seeing me visibly thinner, my husband still called me dirty and, after repeatedly ordering me to clean the house, fled like he was escaping. I stayed at the entrance until he was out of sight, then took a deep breath and made a phone call. A week later, I was leisurely sitting in my parents' living room when calls from my husband kept coming in. Calls from my husband kept coming in one after another. After watching for a while, my parents started to panic, so I reluctantly answered.
Don't mess with me. What the hell is this? Explain.
I instinctively moved my smartphone away from my ear at the sound of my husband's loud voice the moment the call connected. Still, I sighed at the loud enough voice and listened to him.
I can't get into the house. What's going on? Don't change the locks on me while I'm away.
The real estate agent changed them. It's kind of gross to have the same keys as the previous tenant for the next one, right? So, they changed the locks when selling the house. Huh? Real estate agent? Oh, didn't you see the sign? It's right there next to it, for sale. There was silence on the phone for a while before the angry voice came again.
What are you doing on your own? Who gave you permission to sell it? Why are you selling it?
You said the whole house smells. So, I cleaned the entire house, including that. And why would I need anyone's permission to sell my house?
Your house. That's not right. That house belongs to your grandfather. It's a crime to sell it without being the title holder.
That house was given to me, I remodeled it, and it's in my name. You can't just sell it if you're not the title holder. Indeed, the house we lived in belonged to my grandfather. However, after my grandfather passed away, I, still single, remodeled it into its current form, and after getting married, my husband moved in to live together. My husband was momentarily speechless knowing the title was in my name, but quickly changed his approach.
That house is where I live too. You can't just kick out a resident like that. It's illegal to sell my stuff. Besides, it was our house since we lived there as a couple, so it's not just your house anymore.
Unfortunately, that house was in my name before we got married. We never changed it to a joint title after marriage. Plus, I moved all the stuff out after, so your things are all safe. I did dispose of the sofa you said was smelly, though. My husband seemed panicked by the mention of moving out his belongings. He was asking where and when. It's at your grandmother's house. After all, you're away with Dad gone and no siblings. There was nowhere else to send it but your grandmother's when you went overseas with Audrina. Hearing his belongings were at his kind grandmother's house seemed to calm my husband for a moment, but his voice quickly filled with anger again.
So, you're the kind of woman who sells the house and dumps the belongings while her husband is on a trip. I'm divorcing you. I'll sue for compensation in the divorce court because of this.
It's a relief you're the one bringing up divorce. I don't want you to come to the house anymore, and I'll be heading there with my lawyer soon. So, goodbye. I wonder if my husband truly believed he could win if he took it to court. I calmed my panicking parents while contacting a lawyer. A week later, when I went to what my husband calls his in-laws' house, Audrina slapped me before I even entered the door. I had expected it and deliberately received the slap.
Because of you, the house is a mess. A woman who can't even do housework because of a little morning sickness is useless. Pay the compensation in the divorce court and let's divorce.
As I was rubbing my stinging cheek, planning to retort to Audrina, she saw someone behind me and her face twisted. I thought you showed no remorse, but to strike immediately upon meeting is something else. Behind me was Carol, my husband's grandmother, looking furious. Hello. I'm really sorry for sending the belongings over so suddenly the other day. That's all right. If it hadn't been for that, I wouldn't have noticed at all. I had come to the in-laws' house, which was now the home of my husband's grandmother who had kindly accepted his belongings. When I sent my husband's belongings, I included a letter of apology,
detailing everything about our situation. As a result, the grandmother was furious with her grandson's husband for hurling terrible words at his wife suffering from morning sickness and leaving her to fend for herself. She was equally furious at Audrina for going on an overseas trip with him without admonishing such behavior. The grandmother, now 80 years old, is a gentle figure to her grandson but a disagreeable mother-in-law to Audrina. Since Audrina married into the family, her relationship with the grandmother, due to their clashing personalities, has always been like cats and dogs. Sure enough, Audrina, upon suddenly facing the grandmother, twisted her face in obvious annoyance, which only fueled the grandmother's anger further. After briefly addressing the shouting match between the two, I entered the house. There, my husband stood, dumbfounded next to the grandmother and Audrina. It might have been shocking for my husband to see his kind grandmother and mother arguing so fiercely. However, wanting to discuss matters with my husband without Audrina's interference, I had informed the grandmother of my visit in advance. And we started the divorce negotiation with my lawyer before Audrina could return. The process didn't take much time and ended smoothly. The compensation amount my husband had prepared for the divorce court and its basis were systematically dismantled by my lawyer, leaving him speechless. After a thorough division of assets and agreeing not to approach me except when visiting our child after its birth, my husband readily agreed, and our marriage ended abruptly. As I was leaving the house, the grandmother and Audrina were still standing next to each other. I addressed them briefly before departing, but they seemed too heated in their argument to pay me any mind. Subsequently, I began receiving a barrage of complaint-like emails from my ex-husband. Apparently, he became annoyed with the grandmother coming to the in-laws' house and meddling. Imagining my former husband and Audrina, who had shouted at me so boldly, becoming meek in front of a petite grandmother, finally brought me to laughter. However, the nature of my ex-husband's emails soon shifted towards seeking reconciliation.
Every day there's shouting.
They both ask me what I think when they're fighting, dragging me into it, and it's annoying. It's a lifetime request. Please, let me stay at your place. I'll do household chores or anything. I won't do anything terrible again, and I'll never say it. I want to meet our coming child too. I love you. I want to remarry you.
I responded mechanically. I will not reconcile. As for the child, you can meet if you pay child support.
And left it at that. Eventually, the messages from my ex-husband ceased. Apparently, unable to bear the living conditions, he left Audrina and went somewhere. Not providing any support, Audrina, not yet of pensionable age, is scraping by on her savings. Audrina herself contacted me with this news. No one's helping me. Please, I want to stay at your place. I only went on the trip with my son because he invited me. I had no idea you were suffering so much from morning sickness. She claimed, lining up convenient excuses over the phone, but when I threatened to report her to the police, the calls stopped. Apparently, the grandmother also refused to help, and Audrina, limited by her savings, began working part-time. Thus, she no longer had the energy to call or email me. However, the altercation between the grandmother and Audrina that day is well known throughout the neighborhood, and they saw me deliberately receiving Audrina's slap. Consequently, the neighbors have distanced themselves from Audrina, leaving her to live uncomfortably in her home. Seemingly unable to afford renting a new apartment, she spends her days diminishing in stature. Yet, living alone in a rent-free house should be manageable on a part-time income. My morning sickness has finally subsided, and I no longer vomit. The doctor, learning of my divorce and the circumstances around it, scolded me for accumulating too much stress, which wouldn't help in healing. Though I had been consulting with my family, the stress from living with an uncooperative ex-husband for a while, and dealing with real estate agents online to sell the house, had been too much on my body, and I reflected on this. Moving forward, I plan to avoid stress and return to work. Anyway, I'll be taking maternity leave before giving birth, planning to live at my parents' house. Now, imagining the appearance of my unborn child brings me immense joy. As the days go by, my anticipation grows, and I can hardly wait to see what kind of child will be born. No matter what, I intend to raise my child with love.
Emily, is Grandpa behaving himself?
Oh, yes, well, kind of.
Injuring his leg, old people can be such a nuisance. I wish they'd think about those of us who have to take care of them. Patricia, that's not a nice way to say it.
It's fine, he's already declining quite a bit.
I can't handle the fuss of old people. But you're used to it, so you'll be fine.
The other day, my husband's grandfather, Michael, fell in the garden and injured his leg. It's not a serious injury, but he's already 82 years old. Because of his age, we're having him rest in bed just to be safe, so it doesn't get worse. My mother-in-law won't even go near him, let alone take care of him. I'm Emily, 30 years old. I married 3 years ago and live with my husband Daniel's family. My husband was my boss at the company where I worked, a company founded by his grandfather. When I joined 8 years ago, my father-in-law was already the president, and my grandfather-in-law was the chairman. But back then, the grandfather was still handling all the important tasks and responsibilities of the company. 2 years ago, when Grandpa turned 80, he remained chairman but handed over most of the public duties to my father-in-law.
Michael, you've worked hard all this time. Now leave the company matters to Christopher and take it easy.
My mother-in-law said with a smile, but her words sounded sarcastic to me. Grandfather-in-law is a bit stubborn but a fair and kind person with a good reputation. In contrast, my father-in-law seems somewhat immature, never expressing his opinions clearly, and utterly unreliable compared to Grandpa. And he always does whatever my mother-in-law says. My grandmother-in-law has already passed away, and I never met her. My husband and I started dating when we worked together on the same product planning team 3 years after I joined the company. My husband, who was energetically leading the team, seemed reliable to me, though a bit self-righteous. Maybe I felt that way because I lost my father early and grew up with just my mother. My mother also passed away from illness 2 years ago, and now I have no family other than my in-laws. Shortly after I got married, my mother fell ill and needed care. So I quit my job to take care of her. The fact that my husband's family didn't object was probably due to a single comment from Grandpa.
It's only natural to take care of the mother who raised you alone. Don't worry and take good care of her.
Thanks to that, I was able to be by my mother's side every day for a year without financial worries until she passed away. My mother-in-law seemed a bit dissatisfied, but I was truly grateful. However, since Grandpa handed over the company to my father-in-law, everyone's attitude towards him has gradually changed. They no longer listen to his opinions as much. And I can't shake the feeling that they're treating him carelessly. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but watching my mother-in-law and husband's behavior, I can't help but feel that way. My father-in-law's attitude is non-committal. But it feels like he's ignoring Grandpa, as if he's no longer needed since he's practically retired. Watching my in-laws' behavior, I feel somewhat angry.
Hey, don't you think your attitude, Patricia, and yours too, is a bit cold towards Grandpa?
So, what's the big deal?
Grandpa tries to talk to you, and you barely respond. You don't even try to help him. Like I have time to deal with old people. You can take care of Grandpa. You're the one with free time. You don't have to talk like that.
Quiet.
I'm tired from work. Don't nag me about unnecessary things.
This is how it goes. No matter what I say, they won't listen to me. My grandfather-in-law doesn't say anything to his family about this. Now, I'm the only one who talks to my grandfather-in-law at home.
Grandpa, the weather is nice today. Shall we go for a little walk outside? Your leg seems to be healing well, and I think it will be good rehabilitation.
Thank you. Let's go out for a bit then. When the two of us went to the park, there were several families with children playing around. My grandfather-in-law looked at the scene with joy.
Christopher and Daniel had times like that too.
Grandpa? I was busy with work and couldn't take care of the children much. Maybe that's why I couldn't raise Christopher and Daniel properly. My grandfather-in-law said with a slightly sad face, almost like he was talking to himself. Christopher is my father-in-law, and Daniel is my husband. I think about how everyone can be kinder to my grandfather-in-law, but I can't come up with a good idea. But then, my in-laws suggested building a house for my grandfather-in-law. This house is over 50 years old, right? The layout is bad, it's hard to use, and instead of spending money on repairs, it would be better to build a new house in a more convenient location.
A new house?
Michael is getting older, and it's good that he only got injured last time, but we never know what will happen. So, let's make the house barrier-free so we won't have trouble if care is needed.
I see.
We can even put Michael's room in the middle so everyone can take care of him easily.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Right. So, it's settled then? And Michael, about the cost.
If it's a house for all of us, I'll take care of it. Talk to Mr. Jones about the money.
Typical Michael. Thank you. We appreciate it.
My mother-in-law smiled happily. It seems to me that they only flatter him when they want money. But if everyone takes care of my grandfather-in-law after moving to the new house, I thought there could be nothing better. Mr. Jones is the company's in-house counsel and also manages my grandfather-in-law's personal assets. My grandfather-in-law liked his character and made him in-house counsel, and it's been nearly 30 years. He's 58 now and the person my grandfather-in-law trusts the most. I've met him several times, and he seems to be a very honest person. He always cares about my grandfather-in-law's health, and sometimes I think he's more like a son than his real sons. Having such people around my grandfather-in-law makes me feel a little relieved. I wasn't informed about where or what kind of house was being built. But my mother-in-law seemed very cheerful, and the three of them were looking at interior design magazines and discussing various things. So it seemed to be going smoothly. Then something unexpected happened. It was revealed that my grandfather-in-law had a debt of $1,820,000.
Wait, what's this about $1,820,000?
My grandfather-in-law had become a co-signer for a loan for a friend's company. But that company was in trouble, and the debt had become my grandfather-in-law's responsibility.
Wait, they're not going to take the house that's under construction, are they? Since the contract has already been completed, and as Patricia said, it's in the president's name, so it's fine.
My mother-in-law seemed relieved at those words.
Oh, thank goodness. I'm glad we did it my way.
Listening to that conversation, I learned for the first time that the house was in my father-in-law's name. Even though my grandfather-in-law had paid for it, putting it in my father-in-law's name seemed just like something my mother-in-law would do. I also wondered why they didn't think of giving up the house to help repay the debt.
Hey, this debt is Michael's fault, and it has nothing to do with us or the company, right? Well, it was signed in Michael's name. Oh, good. Then there's no problem.
I couldn't understand what was good about it. But since my grandfather-in-law didn't say anything during that conversation, I didn't intervene either. After all, it's not an amount I could handle. And a few days later, my grandfather-in-law's behavior began to change gradually. "Grandpa, what would you like for lunch?"
Who are you calling Grandpa? I'm only 50. You have no right to call me that. Huh?
Sorry. Emily, right? I was lost in thought. At first, I thought he was just deep in thought, but when it happened repeatedly, I began to feel uneasy.
Patricia, what are you doing? Where's my meal?
Grandpa, I'm Emily. Patricia is your daughter-in-law. You ate your meal earlier.
I didn't eat. Are you trying to starve me?
I wondered if my grandfather-in-law's condition was triggered by the $1,820,000 debt. And seeing that none of his family members were trying to help him might have been a double shock. What can I do for him? I tried to take my grandfather-in-law to the hospital, but he refused to go. He might not want to admit that he might have dementia. I don't want to force him, but I can't do anything on my own. I consulted my husband, but he only replied that it had nothing to do with him. I can't rely on my mother-in-law either. So I thought my father-in-law was the only option.
Yeah, I heard from Patricia and Daniel. They think it might be dementia?
Can you go to the hospital with us?
But it's not that bad yet, right? If we go to the hospital, others will find out. My father having dementia.
There are good medications now that can slow the progression.
Well, there's no need to rush. Let's watch him a little longer. Emily is here, so it'll be fine, right?
I can't help but think how unreliable these people are. I can't depend on them. Grandpa, let's go to the hospital. Let's get you properly examined.
Who are you? Where are you planning to take me? You're up to no good.
I almost cry thinking about how my once kind grandfather-in-law has become so stubborn. But my mother-in-law just laughs, amused.
Even if he was the chairman, it's over for him now. But now everything, even the company, is all Christopher's. Patricia, Grandpa isn't completely unaware. He's listening to everything.
He'll forget everything soon. He'll start wandering, dribbling.
Just thinking about it gives me chills. He's nothing but a nuisance now. How can you say that? Grandpa has worked hard for the family all his life.
My mother-in-law's words make me angry and sad. But my grandfather-in-law just smiles.
See? This old man doesn't understand anything. Patricia!
I'm furious at my mother-in-law's laughing and words. But soon, the new house will be ready. Things might change once we move there. Since it's a house that Grandpa built, the family might show some gratitude and be kind to him. I couldn't completely abandon that faint hope. And 2 months later, the house was finally built. For days, I had been forced to pack my in-laws' and husband's belongings, while my father-in-law's and my things were mostly untouched. Even when I tried to pack my things, my in-laws and husband kept giving me tasks, so I couldn't make any progress. But I thought it would be fine to move the small things later since this house wasn't going away. On moving day, after moving most of the things, I went to call my father-in-law, but my husband said, "You and Grandpa can stay here."
What?
You can stay in this house.
We don't need any extra baggage in the new house.
In other words, you and Grandpa will live here from now on. And I'll give you Grandpa's debt too. Well, you can at least be a housekeeper.
Hey, let's go. Yeah, I'm coming. Good luck with the debt repayment and live in care.
With those words, my in-laws cheerfully got into the car and left. I was stunned for a while. I couldn't immediately understand what had just happened. Were we just abandoned? And not just me, but my grandfather-in-law too. only they would live in the new house. It took me a while to understand because it was beyond my imagination that someone could do something so cruel. How should I explain this to my grandfather-in-law? I slowly returned to the back room. I don't mind taking care of my grandfather-in-law at all. That was my intention from the start. As I was about to timidly call out to him, who was sitting with his back to me, he seemed to sense my presence and turned around before I could speak.
Have they gone already?
My grandfather-in-law's expression as he said that looked completely different from the dazed look he had just moments ago. To be frank, he seemed like a different person. I thought maybe a different symptom had emerged. But the next moment, my grandfather-in-law smiled. And then, his following words surprised me. As I was talking to my grandfather-in-law, Mr. Jones came.
Chairman, have you finished getting rid of the unnecessary staff?
Yes, it's all done.
Let's go, shall we?
Where are we going?
Of course, to the new house.
I left the house where I had been living, led by my grandfather-in-law, without understanding what was happening. The next month, countless calls came from my mother-in-law and husband. My grandfather-in-law said he wouldn't deal with them anymore, but I answered my husband's call because of the divorce.
Hey, Emily! Is Grandpa with you? When I went to the old house, it was for sale. It's not worth $1,820,000, so you can't repay the debt. Is that why you did that?
What do you mean?
Put Grandpa on. Dad said he can't get in touch at all. That forgetful old man has done something outrageous.
I knew what he was talking about, but I wanted to hear what my husband would say.
Grandpa sold the company's stocks to the executive director. Thanks to that, the executive director became the largest shareholder, and a shareholders' meeting and board meeting were held. And Dad was dismissed as president.
But the executive director is well liked, and maybe Grandpa thought he was better to hand over the company to?
The executive director must have deceived the senile old man into selling the stocks. This is invalid.
You seem to be misunderstanding something, but Grandpa doesn't have dementia. If anything, he seems more coherent than before.
What?
I too, until that moving day, had seriously thought that my grandfather-in-law had dementia. It seems that my grandfather-in-law had been suspicious from the time my mother-in-law said she would build a house to live with him. So he devised a plan. He pretended to have dementia to see how my in-laws and husband would react. As expected, they showed their true colors one after another. In the end, they left my grandfather-in-law and me behind.
I struggled to hold back my laughter because everything went exactly as I expected.
My grandfather-in-law said. I was surprised, relieved, and a little conflicted.
To deceive the enemy, you must first deceive your allies.
He laughed. He seemed to have been getting regular updates on the company from the executive director and Mr. Jones. With my grandfather-in-law gone, my father-in-law and husband did as they pleased. Self-righteous, completely ignoring the opinions of the employees. Constant entertaining at the company's expense. He had handed over the company to my father-in-law, but he was worried about the future, so he took this measure. In the end, he decided he couldn't entrust it to his son and left it to the executive director.
What about the $1,820,000 debt?
That's gone now.
Indeed, my grandfather-in-law had been a guarantor for a friend's debt. But he also owned personal assets that exceeded that. After stepping back from the company's operations, he had invested in real estate and made a considerable profit. So there was no problem at all, but if I had said that, it was clear that my mother-in-law and husband would target it. That's why I only talked about the debt. The friend was the son of a benefactor who had helped my father-in-law when he was young. Moreover, since then, the countryside land that the son owned was going to be developed into a resort. And he was able to sell it at a high price, so there was no need to take on the debt.
You're kidding!
But more importantly, are you guys okay?
We're not okay. Both my father and I were denounced by the company. What should we do now?
Well, there's also the mortgage on the house.
What? What do you mean, the mortgage on the house?
Huh? You haven't realized it yet?
The house money should have been all paid by Grandpa.
Maybe you don't remember what Grandpa said at that time? When my mother-in-law talked to my grandfather-in-law about money, he had set the condition that
if it's a house where everyone, including me, will live.
In other words, if that wasn't the case, he wouldn't pay. Even if the house was in my father-in-law's name, my grandfather-in-law intended to pay if everyone was living together.
That's just because you assumed Grandpa would pay and didn't look at the documents properly, right? Christopher signing without checking everything. It shows he really didn't have the qualities of a president. You're kidding!
Afterward, my parents-in-law ended up losing the house they had built because they couldn't pay the mortgage. Now they live in an old apartment over 50 years old and are struggling to pay off the unpaid loan. My mother-in-law and husband have been contacting me alternately, saying we should all live together, but that's impossible now. My grandfather-in-law has retired from his chairman position, and now he has bought an old house in the countryside, and we are living together. Emily, you can go and live wherever you like, freely. You don't have to worry about living expenses. My grandfather-in-law told me, but I chose to be with him. If I'm not in the way, please let me be with you. When I said that, my grandfather-in-law's eyes welled up with tears. Thanks to Mr. Jones, the divorce was finalized, and procedures were taken to exclude my former father-in-law and former husband from inheritance. And I became my grandfather-in-law's adopted daughter. If anything happens to my grandfather-in-law, who has become my father, I intend to take care of him until the end. Now, the two of us enjoy working in the fields together.
Dad, look at this radish. It's big.
In the pouring sunlight, warm moments flow. I wish for these days to continue even one day longer.
There is no seat of mine.
Olivia, oh, your seat? I canceled it.
Ava.
Today is the wedding ceremony of my dear brother, Jack. Me, his real sister, not having a seat at the groom's side is unthinkable.
What do you mean by canceled? Oh dear. I mean exactly what I said. Your seat isn't here anymore.
Laughing almost cartoonishly, adorned with numerous necklaces and bracelets, is Ava, the bride's mom. To me, she's just my sister-in-law's mom, not someone I usually interact with much.
But, as it turns out, Ava and I have a bit of history.
I'm Olivia, a 25-year-old singer. Since childhood, I've pursued my dream, enduring hardships and disappointments, but 3 years ago, I passed a crucial audition. That led to hit songs, and now I'm busy with solo concerts and TV appearances. I met my husband, Michael, at work, and we married a year ago. Both my professional and personal life are thriving. It's all thanks to the support of my family. Especially my brother, Jack, who's always been here for me. He had been claiming to me as, "I'm your first fan," since my debut. However, in the entertainment industry, I sometimes face criticism for being frivolous or chasing dreams endlessly. When Jack's marriage was decided, my biggest concern was exactly this.
I worried if Jack would be badmouthed by his wife's family because of my career, but Mary and Ava, his wife and mother-in-law, smiled and supported my work. I was so happy with that, yet I never imagined today's wedding turning out like this.
Come on, how long will you stand there? You're obstructing the other guests. Please leave quickly.
What are you talking about? Today is my brother's important wedding. I'm definitely attending. How many times do I have to tell you? You don't have a seat. Just go home immediately.
Then, a staff member from the venue, seemingly unable to watch any longer, came to help. If there's been a mistake, we can arrange a seat for you. What would you like to?
It's fine. Today is my daughter's wedding. The presence of someone like her would only lower the grade of the ceremony. No need for unnecessary interference.
What do you mean by that?
Don't you get it? I don't want someone with a frivolous job like yours in my family. I cannot let that comment go. Please retract it.
Where did I go wrong?
I'm proud of my job. Just because you're a bit famous, you act so high and mighty.
You're just a one-hit wonder, aren't you?
You'll fade away soon enough. I was so stunned by her words that I fell silent.
My husband Michael, perhaps out of anger, had gone pale and was glaring at Ava.
Was Ava really so pleased with our situation?
She dramatically spread her arms wide with a triumphant look. Her heavy bracelets clanged loudly. If you really want to attend badly, there's one condition. If you can meet it, you're welcome at the wedding. All right, let's hear it for now. Though I was thinking, what kind of condition? I prepared to listen. Ava's face twisted into an even more satisfied, mocking smile.
Quit your singing career. Then I'll allow you to attend.
I couldn't help but raise my voice at Ava's outrageous suggestion. Ava snorted arrogantly.
Her expression seemed to say, there's no way you could do that. She knew I couldn't accept such a condition and seemed to enjoy seeing me struggle.
You can't do it, can you? You always put yourself first. Your job is more important to you than your own brother, isn't it?
Such a selfish and detestable woman. There's no place for you here. Just leave.
Shocked by her cruel words, my husband Michael started to retort, but I pulled his arm to stop him.
Michael looked at me unhappily, but I shook my head slightly and then faced Ava squarely. Understood. Then, we'll leave here.
What?
Michael, let's go.
Wait a minute. This is your own brother's wedding, are you sure? Ava seemed panicked as I began to leave the venue, was saying nonsensical things.
My reaction must have been quite different from what Ava had expected.
Perhaps she thought I would be crying, begging, please let me attend the ceremony.
Right after leaving the venue, I heard Ava's screeching voice. How insolent!
But I didn't stop. As I walked down the corridor, I heard someone calling my name from behind. Turning around, I saw Jack running towards me, looking frantic.
Sis, I heard everything. This is unbelievable, truly unacceptable. Jack, calm down a bit. How can I stay calm in this situation? Michael and I had to soothe an agitated Jack together.
Once he calmed down a bit, I took a deep breath and faced him.
I'm sorry, Jack. I didn't mean to cause trouble on your special day.
This isn't something you should apologize for, sis. But why would Ava say something like that?
Well, anyway, now things happen like this, I'm calling off the wedding.
Then it's my turn to be surprised.
What? Wait a minute. That's too much.
I can't have a wedding feeling like this.
But what about Mary? I'm fine with it.
Surprised by the unexpected voice, I turned to see Mary standing there. Dressed in a beautiful white wedding gown, Mary looked like a fairy, but her face was clouded with sadness.
This pained my heart even more.
I'm sorry that my mom's behavior. I don't understand why she did that.
It's not Mary's fault. But I can't go on with the wedding knowing I've caused you such distress.
We'll explain it to the guests. So, sis, don't worry about it.
All right. But don't push yourselves too hard. Sis, I'm sorry. I'll come and apologize properly later. I'm very sorry.
Mary. Tears streamed down Mary's face as she apologized repeatedly, and I felt like crying too.
What should have been the happiest day of her life was ruined. This made me even angrier at Ava.
But there was nothing more we could do there. Michael and I left the venue with feeling terrible. According to Jack, Who called me that night? When Ava heard the wedding was cancelled, she was furious. Seemingly oblivious that she was the cause, although she ranted about the preparations and the money spent. However, an angry, tearful Mary and Ava's husband, now aware of the situation, scolded her, and she reluctantly backed down. Jack and Mary told the guests that a family member had fallen ill as an apology.
Not revealing the truth was probably their way of showing some mercy to Ava.
Thinking of their feelings, I felt deeply saddened. How did things end up like this?
While Jack and Mary's support was comforting, but I couldn't help feeling down, blaming myself for being a singer.
A week later, Michael and I visited Jack's house. We had received a call from Jack and Mary, who wanted Ava to join them in making a formal apology.
They should be the ones coming to our house. Ava absolutely refuses to do that. Are they really sorry then? I think so too, but considering Jack and Mary's feelings.
I didn't want to see Ava, but after hearing Jack and Mary's earnest apologies on the phone, I couldn't refuse. Besides, I had something important to resolve.
Sis, sorry for bothering you today.
Mom, come on, greet them properly. They apologized repeatedly as we arrived. Ava, looking displeased, merely muttered, "Oh, hello."
Seeing this, an almost tearful Mary scolded her.
I was beyond anger, so already wanting to leave, but I didn't. Because Jack urged, "Please come in." Michael and I sat down, opposite side was Jack and Mary, with Ava also seated.
It's about.
Mary began.
I wanted to be a singer. It's embarrassing now. There's nothing embarrassing about it. Mary has more talent than anyone. Mom, please be quiet. As you can see, she was more enthusiastic about me becoming a singer than I was. Singing is the perfect career for Mary.
Please, just be quiet. Ava, about to start shouting, was silenced by Mary's firm words.
Of course, singing was my dream too. But as I realized there were better singers out there, my desire faded. Yet, Mom insisted I become a singer. So, 3 years ago, in my graduation year, I promised the audition I took that would be my last. If I passed, I'd pursue singing, but if I failed, I'd give up. And I failed. It wasn't just a failure. You made it to the final round. You were almost successful.
As Ava exclaimed, I was intrigued by the audition 3 years ago. It was the same audition that kick-started my career as a singer. I had a suspicion. Mary, was that the audition?
Yes. The same one Olivia passed. I participated too.
I hadn't realized it at all. You only care about yourself, don't you?
Such an unpleasant woman.
Mary, with tears in her eyes, reproached Ava, who spat out her words with vehemence.
As I watched the two of them, I finally felt a sense of understanding.
Hearing Mary's story, Ava's past behavior finally made sense to me. And seeing Ava's attitude now, I decided to go through with a decision I had secretly made.
I finally understand, Ava.
Oh, what's with that look? How insolent.
Honestly, I wasn't sure whether to say this or not. After all, you're Jack's mother-in-law. I didn't want to make a fuss.
What do you mean? Ava, you've been saying it all along, haven't you?
To introduce Mary for a singing job or to refer her to my agency.
Eh? Mom, you said that?
That was just small talk. Even for small talk, it felt like big pressure. You became more aggressive when I didn't take you seriously, and recently, you even threatened to sell my private photos to a tabloid if I didn't introduce her.
Hey, that's practically threatening. Jack, enraged, leaned forward, but I gestured for him to stay calm. Next to him, Mary opened and closed her mouth in disbelief. She might have been too shocked to find words, not expecting her own mom to do such things.
I felt a bit guilty, but I couldn't stop now. The incident at the wedding ceremony, was it your way of getting back at me because things didn't go your way? Mom, did you really do such a terrible thing? That is. You coward. Bringing this up in front of Mary.
I knew Ava didn't want Mary to know about her actions. Mary would be hurt if she found out. That's why I had been hesitant to say anything. But I had explained the situation to Michael, then he nodded slightly at me from beside of me. Ava was ignoring Mary's attempts to stop her, approached me, veins throbbing on her temples.
Let me make it clear. Mary has far more potential as a singer than you. If it weren't for you, she would have passed the audition. She could have been a singer, even a star. I let her marry into a less impressive family, thinking it might lead to a singing opportunity for her. How dare you take advantage of my kindness?
Ava's intensity silenced not just me, but Jack and even Mary. As we stood there stunned, Ava continued her irrational tirade. You probably used some dirty tricks to pass that audition, didn't you? Bribe the judges, maybe even seduce them. You seem like the type of doing that really well. Even now, who knows what you're doing to get work?
Mom, please stop.
Mary's tearful plea seemed unheard by Ava. I was so overwhelmed, I didn't know whether to be angry or sad. Then, Michael spoke up.
Olivia passed the audition on her merit. Aren't you a sweet husband? But your wife's popularity is just a fluke. Likewise, Mary failing the audition was a matter of merit.
Michael's firm tone even caught Ava off guard.
I remember that audition 3 years ago well. All the finalists were closely matched in talent. But Olivia had the strongest determination to become a singer. What right do you have to say that? You're not even involved. I am involved. Huh? I was a judge at that audition. I'm Michael, a music producer. Michael, the famous music producer Michael?
Michael is known as a famous music producer whose works are all hits. Even those not well-versed in music have likely heard his name. He seldom appears in the media, so his face isn't widely recognized. That's why it's understandable that Ava hadn't recognized him. Ava blinked in surprise for a while, but then approached Michael with a sly smile. I had no idea that you were the famous Michael. You should have told me sooner. What would you have done if I had?
Of course, I would have introduced Mary to you. She's a diamond in the rough. With your help, Michael, she could become a star singer. Enough, Mom. Do you even know what you're saying? Be quiet. I will make Mary a singer, no matter what. Stop it, please.
Mary yelled with a voice that sounded to shake the room, tears streaming down her face as she glared at Ava. Her face was red with anger, fists clenched tightly, clearly furious from the bottom of her heart.
In conclusion, Mom just wanted to make me a singer for her own vanity and desires. That's the worst. How can you say such things to your mother? A parent's dream is their child's dream. Children have a duty to fulfill their parents' dreams. Don't you understand that? I gave birth to a child with a talent for singing, just for this.
Don't talk nonsense.
The one talking nonsense is you. You could have been rich and famous. What a disappointment.
That's it, I've had enough. I'm cutting ties with you, Mom.
What? Are you out of your mind? From this moment, you are a stranger to me. Please leave. Mary, don't joke around like that. Get out.
Mary, with a strength that belied her slender arms, pulled Ava and pushed her outside the door. Ava, having been thrown out, angrily pounded on the door. When Mary threatened to call the police if she didn't quiet down, Ava's anger turned to tears and pleading.
Mary, why are you doing this to me? I've always done everything for you. Still saying that. Apologize to Olivia, you shameless woman.
Watching Mary shout pained to me, but I was glad she stood by me to the end.
I secretly decided that if Jack and Mary would have another wedding, I will definitely support them.
3 months after the incident with Ava. Ava, disowned by Mary, was also divorced and kicked out of her home by her husband. It was discovered that she had secretly incurred debts in her efforts to make Mary a singer.
She faced claims for damages to her family and me, as well as the wedding cancellation fees, which further increased her debts.
Now, she's living modestly, working part-time to repay her debts. Having been a housewife for so long, it's been tough for Ava to work outside. She frequently contacts Mary, saying, "We're family, after all."
But Mary firmly rejects her each time.
This experience taught me that being a well-known name can unexpectedly attract resentment. Although having achieved my dream, I consider myself fortunate and will continue to work hard as a singer.
The compensation money from Ava was given to Jack and Mary, which they used for their rescheduled wedding. Seeing them finally happy was a great joy for me. Why are you even here?
I smiled sweetly at my husband, who was pointing and yelling at me, sitting at the attorney's bench in the courtroom. My husband, causing a commotion, was cautioned by the judge. He reluctantly fell silent, but his eyes were still glaring fiercely.
It's your fault for having an affair and getting sued for alimony in this divorce case. To think it even led to a trial.
As I calmly pointed to the evidence and cornered my husband, he slumped, utterly dejected.
But this trial is not the end. I will pursue you relentlessly. Be prepared.
I murmured quietly to myself. My name is Scott, I'm 48 years old and a lawyer. I married my husband George 21 years ago. He runs a company, and we were both busy with work, so we chose a child-free life. Instead, we made as much time as possible for each other, going to movies and traveling. George once dreamt of becoming a movie director. Though that dream never materialized, he started a video production company after we got married. In recent years, he became busy with a new venture, and before I knew it, our time together had dwindled. Still, as a couple in our late 40s, I thought this was to be expected and didn't worry much about it. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine he was having an affair. The future I vaguely envisioned, growing old together, was suddenly shattered.
Scott, can you take over this case for me? Thanks.
3 months ago, my boss assigned me a divorce case involving a claim for alimony. Our law firm handles many divorce cases, so it wasn't an unusual assignment. If the husband is cheating, he should just settle the alimony before it goes to trial. In this case, the husband is suing his wife for divorce and alimony due to her affair, and also making claims against her lover. The divorce is already settled, and the wife has finished paying the alimony. However, the issue is with her lover. A company president with substantial wealth, who insists he's not responsible and refuses to pay the alimony. Initially, another lawyer in my firm was handling this case, but he got swamped with other matters, and it was passed to me since I had some free time. During the handover, Paul apologetically mentioned,
"This guy is quite a piece of work. Looks down on everyone else."
That statement had slightly bothered me. A tricky cheater, huh? I wonder what kind of person he is. As I was going through the documents handed to me to check the defendant. To my astonishment, the name written there was George. My husband. It seems neither my boss nor my colleagues had realized this. What does this mean? He was having an affair behind my back? I double-checked the documents several times, thinking it might be someone with the same name, but the workplace matched his company, and even the birth date and address were correct. I remembered, a few months ago, he who were back home unusually early asked me,
"Your firm handles a lot of divorce cases, right?" "Yes, but why?"
"A friend of mine is in trouble. He's been sued for alimony over an affair, and he's not happy with the amount."
"What happens if he doesn't want to pay?" "Usually, they start with a lawyer and try to settle, but if that fails, it'll go to civil mediation if it's between a husband and the affair partner."
"Oh? So it doesn't go straight to court?"
"It can, but most people don't want to because it's costly and time-consuming. So, many give up and settle even after going through mediation."
"Huh. So you don't have to pay?"
Come to think of it, there was a precedent where they didn't have to pay even after going to the Supreme Court.
I forgot when it was.
"What? You don't have to pay even if it goes to court?"
At that moment, his peculiar delight made me feel uneasy.
"But if someone's breaking up a family, they should make amends, I think."
Who's this friend? You wouldn't know him, Scott? No matter how much I asked, he refused to disclose the friend's name. Was that conversation actually about himself? Unbelievable. I was so happy that night, thinking we could finally have dinner together after a long time. It seemed he only wanted information that would benefit him. According to the documents, the affair between my husband and the other woman started 5 years ago when she was hired as an accountant at his company. That was about the time he started saying he was busy with a new business, leading to more overtime and business trips. So that was it. But I also didn't notice the changes in my husband as my workload increased with more cases to handle. The affair came to light 6 months ago when the other woman's husband found out. The discussion between the woman, her husband, and the distribution of property, and the amount of alimony in the divorce case caused some friction, but it was quickly resolved through mediation by a colleague lawyer and didn't go to court. However, around the same time, the husband filed a claim for alimony against George, the affair partner. I don't want to pay. He refused. He dodged the issue during mediation as well, refusing to acknowledge any responsibility for the alimony. I never imagined he would use the information I gave him in such a way, and anger surged within me.
So, he was cheating and using me all along. I won't let this go easily.
That's why I decided to divorce him and press on relentlessly. In situations like this, lawyers are not supposed to handle cases involving their own family members. But there's an exception if the client agrees. I immediately contacted the client, Randy. You're George's wife? The next day, at the cafe where we met, Randy was quite surprised as I explained the situation.
Yes. And with your consent, I'd like to handle this case.
Wouldn't that mean you'd conduct the trial favorably for your husband?
That will absolutely not happen. Because once this trial is resolved, I plan to immediately file for divorce myself.
I have no intention of being cheated on and just letting it slide. I plan to fight back, as a wife and as a lawyer, with my pride on the line. If you're that determined, please, take the case. Randy, sensing my resolve, officially asked me to represent him. But George has been consistently refusing to pay the alimony. It's terrible considering he's a wealthy company president and not in need of money. I'm not after the alimony. I want him to properly apologize for destroying our family. Randy clenched his fists and bit his lip in frustration. The discussion between Randy and his wife about the distribution of property already favored him due to the affair admission and photographic evidence, so the matter was already settled.
I really wanted to end all this as quickly as possible and forget about it. But I just can't let it go like this. Your feelings are completely justified.
George, being a business owner, is clever and can talk his way out of anything. I'm just a simple salaryman, can I even compete?
Not at all. People who believe they are clever often make trivial mistakes in unexpected places. I will make sure to corner him, just leave it to me.
Our marriage wasn't going well to begin with, and he even said he doesn't see the point in paying alimony. That wasn't the case. If George hadn't laid a hand on my wife, we would have been fine. The frustration in Randy's tone was palpable. Naturally, no one wants to go through a costly and time-consuming trial. George probably looks down on Randy, a company employee, thinking he can get away with anything because he's a wealthy president. That's what I felt. George was kind and wonderful before our marriage. But after he became independent and started his own business 15 years ago, money started flowing in, and he gradually changed. The places we dined at shifted from local bars to upscale restaurants, and eventually, he started saying that those who eat at cheap places are poor. Whenever I admonished him, he initially blushed and apologized, but eventually,
"These are bottom feeders who can't even start their own business,"
he started saying. His company was thriving, and perhaps he got carried away. But success in business isn't always a given. As a lawyer, having seen many who failed yet managed to recover, I believed he would eventually come to realize this. Yet, he seems to have become more arrogant than I ever imagined. Luckily, or unfortunately, he's still unaware that I know about his affair.
Just watch, I won't let this go.
I contacted someone to gather compelling evidence against him and prepared meticulously for days for the trial. On the day of the court hearing, as I sat in the courtroom with Randy, George entered, pointed at me, and yelled,
"Why are you even here?"
I will be representing Randy. I'm Scott, the attorney in charge. Your lawyer has been informed about the change of representation.
George glanced at his lawyer in disbelief, who nodded in confirmation.
You probably outsourced everything to the company's legal advisor, not bothering to check who the new attorney was. That's ridiculous. I don't accept you being in charge.
I have the client's consent. Your consent, as the defendant, is not needed in this case.
I don't care. Change the lawyer.
He, causing a commotion, was quieted by the judge but kept glaring at me.
It's your fault for having an affair and getting sued for alimony. To think it even led to a trial.
Throughout the trial,
I shouldn't have to pay alimony for the affair,
he persistently claimed,
it's not my fault we got divorced.
Insisting on just that one point. He probably researched Supreme Court precedents based on my information. But he misunderstood them.
There's a Supreme Court decision saying you don't have to pay, so I don't see why I should.
Indeed, a previous case did dismiss a claim for alimony due to mental distress caused by an affair.
See.
He sat back, smug and confident.
Are you aware of the rest of that precedent? While it's true that alimony for mental distress was not granted, claims for alimony due to the affair itself are valid.
What?
George, looking dumbfounded, while his lawyer scrambled to check the precedent.
No company lawyer, however proficient in corporate law, can match a divorce specialist.
And so, the trial concluded with him ordered to pay $30,000 in alimony for the affair. It's a court decision, so non-payment now risks liens or enforcement actions. Realizing he couldn't escape, his shoulders slumped in defeat.
But this isn't the end. I will continue to pursue this thoroughly. Be prepared.
From that day on, he never returned home. I expected as much. So, the next day, I sent a petition for our divorce trial to his company, along with certain documents.
Please, no more trials. I'll pay the alimony for the divorce as you demand.
A few days later, summoned by my husband, I went to his company's meeting room with a colleague lawyer. As soon as he saw me, he apologized to me.
Oh. So you'll also properly handle the distribution of property, as I suggest.
That's. Investigations revealed my husband's personal assets exceeded $5 million. This was because he cleverly funneled company money into his pocket and, unbeknownst to me, had made me a company officer, drawing a monthly salary of $8,000.
The assets you built after marriage are jointly owned, right? Splitting them would make me a millionaire. And I was an officer. I had no idea. That's a tax-saving measure every company practices.
Maybe, but isn't it strange that I, the concerned party, was unaware?
Is that all just for tax savings? There are quite some suspicious money movements. Maybe this lawyer here and the accountant lady knew about it?
The lawyer beside him averted his gaze upon meeting my eyes.
You realize such actions could strip you of your lawyer's license, right? I've already reported this to the Bar Association.
His lawyer turned pale and trembled, aware of the gravity of his actions.
Of course, you're prepared for the company to collapse due to these illegalities, right? I just had an affair. I apologize to you, and I've long split up with that woman. Why does the company have to go down too?
Because I am a lawyer.
I can't overlook the wrongdoings I've found.
How? And how did you get the company's internal documents? You conspired with the company's president, the legal advisor, and the accountant lady to commit fraud. But there are still people in the company who can't tolerate such corruption.
The person I had contacted before was the company's vice president. He had supported George and built up the company from the start, but could no longer bear his changing nature. So, when I reached out and explained the situation, he readily cooperated.
The vice president wept, hoping you'd return to your original, pure intentions. He did what? And yet, you found the vice president, who cautioned you, bothersome, and threatened to fire him. That's because he nagged me over using some company money. You too. Just because you're a lawyer, you act all high and mighty.
He lashed out at me in frustration, so I was about to say something right back, but my colleague lawyer calmed me down. Then, the colleague presented him with divorce papers and a settlement document.
If you sign these divorce papers and the agreement now, we can avoid a trial.
So, you'll forgive everything?
Yes, I'll forgive the affair.
Fine. He, relieved to avoid a trial, signed the documents, ignoring his own lawyer's protests. Done signing.
Is this okay? Yes. But I'll report the embezzlement from this company to the police, as it's a criminal matter. What? That's not what you promised. You said you'd forgive everything.
I said I'd forgive the affair.
How many times do I have to say it? As a lawyer, there's no way I'd overlook a cover-up.
He seemed to want to retort, but he was at a loss for words. The upcoming trial will be tough.
Need a lawyer? Oh, but I've already been asked to represent the vice president. Then, I guess I'll see you in court next time.
I declared this to him and his lawyer, then left the conference room with my colleague.
Serve you right. I'll make sure the next trial is just as thorough, so look forward to it.
My colleague gave a wry smile as I silently celebrated with a small fist pump.
That's what he gets for underestimating a lawyer wife.
I beamed a wide smile at my colleague. Thus, George and I divorced. We went through the distribution of property, but most of it was deemed not personal assets as it was illegally manipulated company funds. Subsequently, George and his lawyer were sued by the vice president for embezzlement and arrested. They are currently in trial, detained in jail due to the severity of the crime and risk of destroying evidence. It looks like they won't see daylight for a while. Even if they were released, the huge debt they'll face is evident. As for me, I didn't become a millionaire from the distribution of property from George, nor did I want to. Money earned rightfully by one's effort is sufficient. Moreover, my fulfillment as a lawyer comes from being able to help many people. I intend to continue dedicating myself to others, upholding the spirit of freedom and justice, equality and fairness.